So today what I was going to do is I was going to go through the example application that I made and kind of work with y'all to add some more functionality to it. So it's kind of like y'all have inherited your own legacy Haskell project with no documentation and no tests, and now we're going to add features to it. Congrats. So a lot of this should look really familiar. So we have, let's start with the context. So this part right here should look pretty much exactly the same as what we worked on yesterday, right? So what is, can anybody tell me what this does? What the context is for from yesterday? Go ahead.
For basically getting all of the, I don't want to say side effects, but like parameters, URL queries, body, and anything we would like to get to actually process the request.
Awesome, that's exactly it. So it kind of gives us something to kind of keep a hold of all the resources we'd want to access while we're processing the request, including the request itself. And then we have to make it an instance of this type class so that FN knows how to access the request within the context. Okay. Now, this is just my personal preference, but I like to put my context type in a separate module. That makes it easy for any other modules to access. It's also, and then the other thing to think about is in Haskell, you can't have, I guess, recursive dependencies. You can't have a module, like module A can't depend on module B if module B depends on module A.
Circular, I guess.
Circular, yes. So since everything depends on context, the thing that you want to keep in mind when you're adding stuff to this is that it shouldn't depend on anything else. This is kind of your like base. So the other thing I like to put in my context thing, and you don't have to do this, you can be sensible and have a separate module, is I just put stuff that is handy for processing the requests, like little utility functions. This is where I put it since I'm going to be importing it to everything anyway. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, like FN doesn't require you to structure your application in any particular way besides what I've said so far. So you can structure your site however you want, your application. So the next part is actually, I call it site.hs, and this has kind of the initialization of the site and all the routes. So you'll notice that the types here are a little bit different from the types in this slide. So let me pull that up again. So here, my initializer is just of type context. My application function is just of type application. These are pure functions. But in the example application, these are now type IO. Can anybody spot why it has to be IO?
Because it goes to a database.
Right. I added my connection to the database. So now, in order to create my context, I have to create a database, which is a side effect. So that changes the type of my initialization function that creates the context. And any other kind of side effects that you might do if you connected to another sort of storage mechanism, or if you set up background jobs or something like that, would all require IO. So usually your initializer is in IO. So what you have to do is you have to run your initializer in order to create your application, which ends up also being in I/O. And then when you actually start your server, you're going to run this. And I think it's like kind of a convention in Haskell to call something that kind of makes something mook that thing. So mook app is going to now be an I/O action that returns an application. So you can see that. So this is obviously a little bit different from the example app, which is a single module. But usually what you do is you put, you have like a small executable function as well as your library. And that's just how Stack automatically creates your application. When you run like, I don't know if any of you have created an app. If you do like Stack new and name your project, you a kind of skeleton for your app that has this structure of oh, it's hard to see with so much. Nope, that's too small. Okay, here we go. So it has an app directory that can be an executable module. And then it has a source directory, which contains your library modules. And the executable is what's actually going to be running the server. And I think the idea here is that you can have multiple executables that are all running the same library code. And that's kind of handy. And you can also have like your test code depend on your library, but not your executable. Not that we have any tests. Okay, so any questions about this so far? Cool. And you know, if you don't like this structure, you can always change it. It's all just in this package.yaml is where Stack lets you specify the structure of your app, and you can change like what the directory is and what your main is. You can add additional executables like we have for the migrations, which I'll talk about later. So if you're very free, maybe too free, to structure this however you want. Okay, so that is actually running your app. And oh, maybe we should actually try to run it. If you go to the repo, there's instructions on the bottom. Since everybody had to install Postgres anyway to get it working, you should already have Postgres. Okay, so you should be able to run these commands to make your user and your database. So let me know when you're ready to. Were you here yesterday? Yeah. Okay, cool. So this is just the README for the project. So you haven't missed too much. Is that working for everybody? Oh, you don't have it set up? Okay. Next time I will think before adding a database to my live workshop. Or SQLite. Or I'll do SQLite. Okay, cool. Does everybody have a database or need more time? Anybody need more time? Besides the person setting up Docker? Okay. So now, if you've run stack build, then it's probably built the migration execution. Now you can run it, and the way that you run it is you run stack exec migrate up, and that's going to run all the migrations. Oh yeah, if you gave it a different password, you're going to change your password in. Okay, so sorry. If you gave it a different password, then go to rivet.hs and just put in the password right here. So that's line 18. That's migrate/rivet.hs. Anybody having any other errors pop up? Okay. Cool. So now you have a migration, or you've run your migration, so your database is set up. So if you do stack GHCI and then 2 to say that you want to run the main module. You can start your app by typing main. And then, yeah, we're back to the Hello World app. So let me know if you have any trouble getting to this point. Oh, if you had to, if you changed your password, if you used a different password, which you probably did, you'll also need to change it in line 14.
Also the Docker run command in the Discord.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
One parameter is create table, the other one is drop table. Is one the up and one the down?
Yep. That's exactly it. Okay, so can everybody see Hello World in their app? Everybody good? Okay.
What's the README for the starting?
It's
Mine's the same.
yeah, you can the way that I always work on applications is I start up GHCI, and then main, and you can run it that way. And then if you make changes, you can do Control R and then run it again. And that's kind of handy. There's a tool called GHCID that kind of handles this for you, but I'm so used to doing it this way that I haven't started using it. Okay, so that's, we did this route in the tutorial yesterday. So if you go to blogs, whoa, you can see this beautiful HTML page instead of just plain text. And it's actually reading this blog with the title hello and the body world from the database.
Just get blocks. Yeah, me too.
Huh. Oh, well, that's because you don't have anything. You haven't added a blog yet.
Yes.
Yes. So the way that, for now, the way that you're going to add a blog is you're going to just type create / and then some title. I don't know if this is actually going to work. And somebody. No, that didn't work. Wait, no. Use params. Yeah. Sorry. Amazing. And now if I go back and refresh, I should see something. So you can see what the route is in blog / fix that later. And you need to have the path create and then 2 params, title and body. Oh, that reminds me.
I'm sorry, how did you run this cool shell-like stuff where you can reload and restart server?
This is from, oh, you mean what's the command?
I guess so, yeah, because I just did a stack run.
Oh, it's stack GHCI.
Oh.
And that starts up GHCI with all your modules loaded. Once you run that, you're going to get a message that says that the main module is ambiguous, and that's because I've got 2 executables. So then you say the second one, because you don't really care about migrations right now. Cool. Okay, so has everybody created a blog in their browser with params? Okay. So you here does anybody have any thoughts on why this is not ideal? Typically you don't have GET requests that can make changes to your database or change the world in any way. Your GET should always be idempotent, and you should be able to make as many GETs without anything changing at all. So what we want to do is change this to a post request. And you can do that by putting this here. By default, all the paths, all the routes are GET, or actually I think by default they're both, unfortunately. But the rest of it is still the same, and this will be a post param instead of a query param now. So I actually haven't tested this, but I'm kind of curious what will happen if I just leave it like this. So I'm using a program called Postman to make my requests. But if you have some other similar program, then you can use that.
For me, the create route doesn't even match the chat. Blocks/create, yeah, is render not found. Is that normal?
Did you add the query params?
Did not change anything.
Okay, so the way that, did you make this request? Title equals title? You have to have both the params or it doesn't match.
So that's not defining the routes, is it?
Yeah, it's right here. Says, I mean, this was, so the way that it was originally is like this.
Yep.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Look like separate routes.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
So the default behavior is that if your request does not match all the parameters that are required in a route, it will fail.
Yes, yes. So I'll show you a way to change that in a second. So, okay. I guess I should say post title. Okay, I don't think this is going to work. Yeah. So there's kind of a weird thing about FN, which is that if you want to use the post body, you have to use a different routing operator. So I don't know if any of you noticed, but in the documentation, there's two routing operators. There's the regular one, and there's this one with like an exclamation point. Like this is, I guess, like I think this is like a Ruby convention. Like this is a scary thing. So this means that it actually parses the request body. Otherwise, it's just going to like leave the request body unparsed. There is a complicated reason why this is the case. I'm kind of curious if I can find the issue where, yeah. Okay, he doesn't have, never explained why this is. But basically, you don't want to like parse the request body if you're not going to use it, I guess. So we have to change the routing operator to this one that parses the request body and restart the app. Oop. And that results in it creating a blog with using post. And we should be able to see it now. There it is. So does that make any sense at all? Okay. Does anybody need to, so this is what it should look like now.
I noticed somewhat unintuitive behavior, I guess. So when I send it a I change method to post but send get anyway, or missed a param, it returned a 404, not found. Why is that? I would have expected a I don't know, a method route or some kind of a request form error.
One thing you could do is you could have it, whoops. One thing that you could do is you could have it fall through to a route with like the same, so let's say that if you do any other, anything else to create, then you're gonna have like a blogs create error or something like that. And then when you specify that, So you could either do something like bad request, or you could do something like you could just throw the error, and then have something else catch it. That might be beyond the scope of what we're doing today. If you don't catch an error before it hits WAI, then, or I don't know if it's warp or WAI that does it, but you'll get the user will just see something went, well, let's just see what it does. The whole thing is I can show you what it does. So you'll see this beautiful error message, which unfortunately the users of my apps have seen before. So probably what you want to do is have some kind of catch. Yeah, you want to like catch everything up here.
This 404 stuff is the default handler, I guess, right? So
Yeah.
if I can match any rule or any route, then I'm just getting a 404 by default by design of
Yes.
404, right?
Yeah. So you have to like actually consciously decide like this should be an error.
Right.
So that's good thing, bad thing, depending on your style or opinions about how web apps should work. I like it.
But that's the fall through thing.
Right.
And that route, so we could have something completely different that
Yeah.
handle.
Yeah, you could have.
Right, but you're ending up with 404 error anyway, right? That might be not perfect. Some people prefer to have more.
Well, no, you could change this to be. You could change your fall through route to not be a 404.
Oh, or
If you put OK text there, it will always be 200 OK.
It won't be the right type because you can see that the type of site is context IO response, and OK text is maybe a response. So you can change that type by using by just saying from just or something or not. Yeah. But yeah, you can do that. It's possible.
Do you have to submit a content type in order to recognize the parameters?
I was using form encoded. I don't know if content type is required.
Yeah, it's required.
Okay.
Which means it already supports JSON config.
This is a very old, my app, the app that FN was basically built to run, is a very old-fashioned app. So, it's mostly forms, but it does handle JSON, so it must work.
if my user agent I'm using for test doesn't lie to me, then I'm not using any content type in request.
Okay. So, okay, let me know when you're ready to move on, or if you want a little more time to mess around with this.
So was again the commands whatever in the browser?
Oh, in the browser?
Because I've spent some time PostgreSQL.
Okay. So the way that you do that is stack GHCI will start up your interpreter. And then you'll get a thing that asks you which executable. And you're going to pick the second one. And then you'll type main to start up the app.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so anybody else have any questions with what we've got so far? Okay, cool. So that's the controller. So now let's look at the view before we get to the actual database stuff. So the views are using a library called Lucid, which I really like. And you can find out more about Lucid. Hackage is a great source. The author, who's the author? Chris Dunn, who's prolific, has a great blog post about it too. But it's a really awesome DSL for writing HTML. This isn't the templating language that I use at work, so I'm actually not super used to using it, but it's still pretty comfortable. And I really recommend it for beginners rather than what I use. So those are in source/blog/view. And you can see a couple of kind of views for our queries. So the way that Lucid works is that you have each HTML element has its own function. And it's usually, I think it's always the name of the element with an underscore. And then you can put in whatever content you want to put in. Whatever would be inside that element is like the arguments. Now this has this unusual type HTML unit, which we haven't seen before. So let's look at the documentation to try to understand just a little bit how that works, or how we can use that. Here we go. So there's lots of really good examples of how to use it in the Hackage documentation, so definitely encourage you to check that out. But here we go. So I mean, it generates HTML. It says it's a monad transformer, which we don't know what that means. And we don't need to know what that means yet. But it does mean, since it's a monad, it means that we can use do notation to put the elements together. And it has two type parameters, which are so that you can combine it. It's like a different, so the way that FN allows you to specify your own types for things is that you have to implement it as a type class. With monad transformers, you have other options for adding your type to its type. But we're just going to use the simplest one, which is using the identity type. So it's not going to do anything fancy. It's just like the identity function, your thing and returns your thing. Whatever you give it, it returns it. The identity monad just doesn't do anything special. So we can just use these elements and not worry about how it works too much. So let's create another, let's change the index to be some HTML instead of, what did I call this? Okay, Lucid, okay. So I'm going to have to import Lucid. Okay. I probably should have done this for the other views too, because if you actually look at the source of this page, or whoops, of this page, I think it doesn't even have like an HTML tag, which is not very good HTML. So we can have, the elements can have children that are also using do notation to kind of say that these are the children of this element, which is very intuitive, I think. So we can have an HTML element that has a head element inside of it, that has a title element inside of it, and then we can go back out to just being inside of the HTML. And then we can say, I don't know, I guess I'll just type that again. Okay? So, I mean, I don't have to look at any docs because it's just the element with the, the one thing is that you do need to, so like this library has lots of nice magic that kind of automatically does stuff for you. So I'm kind of yeah, it just works. Cool. So the reason why I wasn't sure if it would work is because these, whatever's in here has to be of a certain type. And we can look at, so I don't know, do y'all know what this syntax does, this underscore? Just by itself, it's a typed hole. So if you don't know what the type of something is inside of your code, you can use an underscore to find out. And GHC or GHCI will be like, hey, you have a hole here, and I don't know what, I'm going to tell you what type you need to put in. Does that make sense? So this says that there's a, whatever value goes in here needs to be of type HTMLT identity A, where A can be whatever. And that's the same as this type, right? Or about a generalization of this type. So what's interesting is that's not a string. Like this is a string or text or something, right? But it says that the hole where that goes is not a string or text. And this is, similar to the show type class magic. There's this is saying if something looks like a string, it can be HTML. And I think if you look at, The docs, it says something like that. Yeah, here we go. So if you have this language extension, overloaded strings, which is automatically included in all the modules in this project, then plain text just gets turned into HTML unit.
Isn't that a bit scary from an XSS perspective at that point? That's kind of the advantage of the ESL part.
Well, it says right here that it is automatically escaped.
Oh, okay.
So if you type in let's just put that back. Oh yeah, okay, let's do script alert. Oh wait. Okay, let's see what happens here. Ah, it's escaped. So you don't have any scary "you've been hacked" message or whatever. Yeah, so like that's a really neat thing about DSLs like this is that they can automatically do some nifty stuff like that.
So that language extension is not specific only to text. I thought it was only.
No, it's for so what I don't see where Lucid does it, but what library authors can do is they can implement a type class called isString. And then that kind of tells overloaded strings, whenever you see something, this is how you turn that into my type. Okay, so I would like encourage you all to like take a few minutes. I'm gonna just give you actually maybe let's just go till the end of the session and just try out Lucid. One more interesting thing about Lucid is that if you want to add classes, then where's an example? Here we go. So just like, I don't know if they use the same technique, but just like FN, it can handle different numbers of arguments. So P can take just the argument of the contents of the P tag, or it can take a list of attributes and the contents of the P tag. So if you wanted to add a class, you can see right here that you would add a list with the class element in it and what class you want to give that tag. So that's how you would add things like script source or a anchor href. So yeah, let's spend the next 5 minutes just trying it out, and let me know if you run into any weird problems or have any questions about how to do anything.
So this kind of approach is fairly okay for a programmer, but it's very unfriendly for a designer or something like that. Is there another approach that would work for a mixed team?
Sure. Yeah, so that's what, this is not what we use in our production web app. We use we started out using a templating language called Heist. Heist is really cool. So I have another project where if you want to see like a more complex but still open source project, I have this project called Smooch that uses a different templating language. So these tags here are tags that have behavior that are specified by the backend. There are also tags that have like contents that are specified by the backend. And it all looks like HTML, so it's very friendly to front-end developers. Let's see if, and then, I mean, it's a little bit tricky because it's friendly to developers who know HTML, but there's no way to really specify any super complex behavior in the front end. Like a lot of developers or front end designers are used to being able to say, if this, I mean, more complex stuff like for loops or things like that, and being able to specify them on their own. But instead, all that stuff is in the back end. So it gives them a little bit less freedom. So that's like a drawback of this style. But let's see if I can show you what it looks like. So what you do is you give it a list of substitutions, and it goes from the name of the custom element that you're making to how to kind of fill in that blank in the template. So this one's just like some text. This one is a date. One's like this one, map substitutions, takes a bunch of substitutions and a list of things and applies those substitutions to each thing in the list so that you get all of them. And yeah, so that's, I mean, this is not quite Heist. This is like my weird version of Heist, which I don't think anybody should use in production. Unfortunately, I am. But Heist is here, and it's basically the same thing. Yeah, interpreted Heist is probably the more beginner-friendly one. And this is linked in, if you go to FN Haskell and go to reference, there's a whole list of kind of pairings with FN that you can use, including Heist, some database libraries, testing, and things like that. So there's also, because we use Heist so much, there's a kind of a helper module that you can use to use Heist with FN, which works pretty well. There's also other options. There's one I think called like it's like a Haskell take on, oh, thanks. There's a Haskell take on Jinja called Ginger that I bet is pretty good. Okay, so let's take a break.